I'm Henry Lyman. The House Remembers by Robert Francis. The house remembers faces, voices, yes, of course, and the food eaten and the fires kindled. But the house also remembers feet. Especially how one big pair used to pad about comfortable as a cat's, bare on the bare wood floor. And somebody else in clean white heavy socks, his boots left at the door, would curl up tailor-wise, Buddha-wise on the couch. And only then the talk could really begin and go on without end, while listener sat opposite and listened. And once when one big toe had broken bounds, how someone took the sock and darned it, while the wearer sat and wondered. Blisters to operate on, but before the sterile needle, the basin of warm water, and someone kneeling as in the Last Supper. What fireplace naturally remembers are the cold feet it warmed. But does it recall the time when fire was not enough, and someone took bare feet in his bare hands and chafed and cheered the blood while the fire went on quietly burning? I was a frequent visitor to that house myself. Robert Francis was a good friend, and I spent many afternoons visiting with him there and sitting in front of the fireplace with him and talking and telling stories, or just sitting in silence. Francis built the place in 1940, or had it built by a local carpenter named Chester Woodward. Robert bought the land. I think he bought a half acre for about $75, and the house itself cost a bit under $1,400 to build. It was made out of hurricane pine, because in 1938, 2 years before, the huge hurricane of that year knocked down a tremendous number of pine trees, and the lumber was just free to pick up off the ground. All you had to do was saw it up and dry it out, cure it, and go ahead and build. So wood was free to be had. But as I mentioned, he named the place Fort Juniper, partly because he felt it could be a kind of fort, or not a fort of defense or offense, as he would often say, but a fort of defense, just not too far from town, but a little retreat where he could sit and write and think about human life and natural life without interruption. But he also named it Juniper because he was very fond of the juniper bush with its subtle colors and its low-growing capacity and the way it hugs the ground, just as he did in his life and in his poetry. He's certainly present in his poems, but how shall I put it? He never gets in the way. It's the house that's doing the remembering. It's the house that remembers its visitor, and it's the house that remembers the host, and it's the house that remembers what occurs between visitor and host within the house. To me, it's as if the house were almost a mind in itself, the house being a mind in the process of recollection, recollecting these moments that occurred between him and one or another visitor. One thing I might mention, which could bear further reflection or discussion, possibly, is the reference to the Last Supper. The poem goes, blisters to operate on, but before the sterile needle, a basin of warm water, and someone kneeling as in the Last Supper. Well, in the Gospel of St. John, in the description of the Last Supper or the Last Passover, Jesus kneels before his disciples with a basin of warm water and washes their feet. Possibly, probably I should think, is a gesture of humility. So the question would be, what does that do for the poem? And I think one can muse upon that and see where it takes us.